Cycle 14B was a total disgrace. 43 recruits who couldn't march, shoot, or function as a unit. They had already driven 3 drill sergeants to quit, and command was ready to send them home. They were the rejects. But everything changed when Sergeant Olivia Kane arrived. She didn't scream. She didn't humiliate. With a special operations background, she knew what others missed. Failure isn't final. Where everyone else saw weakness, Kane saw a challenge. This is the powerful story of how one woman's quiet, unwavering leadership transformed a broken platoon into real soldiers, proving that a leader's most powerful weapon isn't fear, it's belief in their troops. From wherever you're watching, let us know in the comments. And if this story has earned you respect, click like so others can find it too. The sun had barely cracked the horizon when the formation assembled on the gravel lot of Fort Benning's basic combat training compound. Dust hung in the air like a fine mist, catching the orange light. Boots shuffled. Voices murmured low, uncertain. This wasn't supposed to happen. Cycle 14B had been running for 6 weeks, and they were failing. Not 1 or 2 recruits. The entire platoon. 43 men and women who couldn't meet the standard, couldn't pass the tests, couldn't function as a unit. They had been through 3 drill sergeants already. Each one had requested reassignment after only days with the group. The recruits stood in loose rows, shoulders slumped, eyes dull. They had stopped trying to look sharp. What was the point? They knew what the cadre thought of them. Washouts, rejects. The platoon nobody wanted. At the front of the formation, a senior drill sergeant paced with barely contained frustration. His voice carried across the lot, sharp and bitter. You people are a disgrace. 6 weeks in, and you can't even tie your boots without supervision. You think the enemy's going to wait while you figure it out? No one answered. They had learned that silence was safer than speaking. Command's sending you 1 more instructor, the drill sergeant continued. 1 last chance. You screw this up, you're all going home, understand? A weak chorus of yes, drill sergeant rippled through the formation. He shook his head, disgust written across his face. Pathetic. The formation was dismissed. The recruits scattered toward the barracks, moving like beaten animals. Inside, the air was thick with resignation. Private First Class. Marcus Webb dropped onto his bunk, staring at the ceiling. At 19, he was one of the youngest in the platoon. He had joined the army to prove something to his father, a retired sergeant major who had told him he didn't have what it took. 6 weeks in, his father had been right. Across from him, Specialist Ana Reyes sat on the edge of her bed, hands folded in her lap. She was 26, older than most recruits, a single mother who had enlisted to give her daughter a better life. Now she wondered if she'd made a mistake. Think they'll actually recycle us? She asked quietly. Webb didn't look at her. I think they'll just send us home. Silence settled between them, heavy and final. Down the hall, in the common area, a group of recruits gathered around a table. They spoke in low tones, their words bitter. We're not soldiers, one muttered. We're a joke. 3 drill sergeants quit on us. 3? That says everything. Maybe we don't belong here. The doubt had been building for weeks, layering like sediment until it became the foundation of everything they believed about themselves. They were the platoon that couldn't, the cycle that failed, the recruits who would never make it. And tomorrow, their last chance arrived. She stepped off the transport truck at 500 hours, boots hitting the pavement with quiet purpose. The morning was still dark, the air cold enough to sting. Sergeant Olivia Kane carried a single duffel bag over her shoulder, her uniform pressed sharp despite the long ride from Fort Bragg. She was 34 years old, lean, compact, with a face that revealed nothing. Her hair was pulled back tight, not a strand out of place. She moved with the efficiency of someone who had learned long ago that wasted motion was wasted energy. At the battalion headquarters, the senior drill sergeant who had addressed Cycle 14B the day before stood waiting. His arms were crossed, his expression skeptical. Sergeant Kane, he said, not bothering with pleasantries. You read the file on this platoon? I did, drill sergeant. Then you know what you're walking into. These recruits are done, they've given up. We've had 3 instructors request reassignment, good instructors. They couldn't do anything with this group. Kane set her duffel down. Her eyes stayed level, calm. What makes them failures? The senior drill sergeant blinked, caught off guard by the question. What makes them? They can't pass a PT test. They can't work as a team. They can't follow basic instructions without falling apart. They're weak. Or they've been taught to believe they are. The drill sergeant's jaw tightened. With all due respect, Sergeant, you don't know these people. No, Kane said quietly. But I know what happens when someone decides a person isn't worth the effort. She picked up her duffel and walked toward the barracks before he could respond. At 600 hours, the platoon assembled for morning formation. They expected another drill sergeant like the others. Loud, aggressive, already disgusted with them before the first word was spoken. Instead, Sergeant Kane stood in front of them, hands clasped behind her back, her expression unreadable. She didn't yell. She didn't pace. She just looked at them, one by one, her gaze moving down the line with quiet precision. The silence stretched. Recruits shifted uncomfortably. Some glanced at each other, confused. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Finally, Kane spoke. Her voice was low, controlled, carrying just far enough to reach the back row. My name is Sergeant Kane. I'm your new drill sergeant. I've read your files. I know what they say about you. A few recruits dropped their eyes, shame creeping in. They say you're failures, that you don't have what it takes, that you're the worst cycle this battalion has ever seen. Private Webb felt his stomach tighten. Here it comes, he thought, the speech about how we're worthless. But Kane's next words cut a different direction. I don't care what they say. Heads lifted slightly. Eyes found her again. What I care about is what you do from this moment forward. You've been told you're weak. Maybe you've started to believe it. But belief doesn't define capability. Action does. She paused, letting the words settle. We have 8 weeks left. In that time, you will either prove the rumors wrong, or you will confirm them. That choice is yours, not mine. I'm here to teach. Whether you learn is up to you. No one spoke. The weight of her words hung in the cool morning air. Kane stepped forward, her boots crunching softly on the gravel. We start with the basics. Right now, you're individuals. By the end of this, you'll be a unit, or you'll go home, form up for PT. The platoon moved sluggishly into position. Kane watched, arms crossed, her face giving nothing away. This was going to take time. The first week under Sergeant Kane was unlike anything the platoon had experienced. She didn't scream at them when they failed. She didn't mock them when they stumbled. But she also didn't lower the standard. During the first PT session, half the platoon couldn't finish the run. Kane ran beside them the entire way, her pace steady, her breathing controlled. When they collapsed at the finish line, gasping, she stood over them and waited until they could hear her. You stopped because your mind told you to quit, not your body. Tomorrow, we teach your mind to be quiet. The next day, she ran with them again. And the day after that, slowly, the times improved. Not because she pushed them harder, but because she refused to let them believe they couldn't. In the classroom, she taught map reading, first aid, and tactical movement. Her instructions were clear, methodical, devoid of frustration. When recruits asked questions, she answered them without judgment. Private Webb noticed something strange. Sergeant Kane never raised her voice. Not once. When Specialist Reyes fumbled during rifle assembly, dropping pieces on the floor, the other recruits tensed, waiting for the inevitable humiliation. Kane knelt beside her, picked up the pieces, and handed them back. Again, she said simply. Reyes tried again. Her hand shook. She dropped another piece. Again, and again, and again, until finally, the rifle came together. Reyes looked up, expecting disappointment. Instead, Kane nodded. Good, now do it faster. The platoon began to notice the details, the way Kane's uniform was always perfect, even after 18-hour days. The way she knew every recruit's name by the third day, the way she stayed late, reviewing training plans, adjusting schedules, refining methods. She never took shortcuts. She never gave up on them. And slowly, something shifted. It happened during the obstacle course. The course was brutal. Walls to climb, ropes to swing, mud pits to crawl through. Cycle 14B had failed it twice already, their time so slow they didn't even qualify for grading. This time, Kane stood at the starting line with them. "You're going to run this course together," she said, "as a unit. If one person falls behind, the entire platoon waits. You succeed together, or you fail together." Private Webb frowned. "Drill sergeant, that's going to slow us down." Kane's eyes met his. "Speed without unity is chaos. Chaos gets people killed. Move out." The whistle blew. The platoon surged forward. At first, it was every recruit for themselves, scrambling over obstacles, pushing ahead. But halfway through, Specialist Reyes stumbled climbing the rope wall. She hung there, arms shaking, unable to pull herself up. The faster recruits had already moved on. But then Private Webb stopped. He looked back, hesitated, then ran back to the wall. "Come on," he shouted. "You got this." Another recruit joined him, then another. Together, they braced the rope, gave her footing, pulled her up and over. Kane watched from the sideline, arms crossed, expression neutral. But something in her eyes shifted. When the platoon crossed the finish line, their time was still poor. But they crossed together. Kane stepped forward. For the first time, there was something close to approval in her voice. "That," she said, "is the beginning of a unit." Week 4 brought the night navigation exercise. Recruits were sent into the woods in pairs, given a map, a compass, and a series of checkpoints to find before dawn. It was designed to be difficult. For Cycle 14B, it was nearly impossible. Private Webb and Specialist Reyes were paired together. They moved through the darkness, tripping over roots, losing their bearings, doubt creeping in with every wrong turn. "We're not going to make it," Reyes whispered, her voice tight with frustration. Webb stopped, breathing hard. "Maybe we're not supposed to." They stood in the dark, the weight of failure pressing down. 6 weeks of being told they weren't good enough. 6 weeks of struggling while others succeeded. Then, from the shadows, a figure emerged. Sergeant Kane. She didn't speak at first, she just stood there, flashlight off, letting the silence sit. Finally, Reyes broke. "We're lost, Drill Sergeant." Kane stepped closer, her voice was calm, almost gentle. "You're not lost. You're standing exactly where you need to be. We can't find the checkpoint. Because you stopped looking." Webb shook his head. "We've been trying, we're just not—" "Not what?" Kane interrupted. "Not good enough. Not smart enough, not strong enough." "Who decided that?" Neither of them answered. Kane pulled out her own compass, held it up so they could see the needle in the faint moonlight. "Navigation isn't about knowing where you are. It's about trusting the tools and moving forward anyway. You have everything you need, you just stop believing you could use it." She handed the compass back to Webb. "Now try again." They did. This time, they moved with purpose. Checked the map. Trusted the compass. Found the checkpoint. When they returned to the rally point at dawn, exhausted but successful, Kane was waiting. She didn't congratulate them. She just nodded once and said, "Next time, you'll do it faster." But in that moment, something fundamental changed. They had succeeded. Not because the standard was lowered, not because they were given special treatment, because they stopped listening to the voice that told them they couldn't. The final test came in week 7. The battalion commander arrived unannounced to observe Cycle 14B during their live fire exercise. This was standard protocol, but everyone knew what it really was. A final judgment. A decision on whether the platoon would graduate or be disbanded. The exercise was simple in design, but brutal in execution. The platoon had to move through a simulated combat zone, engaging targets while under pressure, coordinating movement, maintaining discipline. Most cycles completed it without issue. Cycle 14B had never made it past the first phase. The commander stood on the observation tower with the senior drill sergeant, arms crossed, skepticism etched into his face. "This is the platoon Sergeant Kane's been working with?" he asked. "Yes, sir. What do you think?" "Will they make it?" The senior drill sergeant hesitated. 6 weeks ago, I would have said no chance. Now, I honestly don't know. Down on the range, Sergeant Kane stood beside the platoon. Her voice was steady, calm, cutting through the noise of distant gunfire from other ranges. You know the drill. Move as a unit. Communicate. Trust each other. Everything you've learned comes down to this. Private Webb, now acting as team leader, nodded. His hands were steady on his rifle. Beside him, Specialist Reyes checked her magazine, her movements precise. The whistle blew. The platoon moved. At first it was cautious, calculated. But as they advanced through the course, something clicked. Orders were given and followed without hesitation. When one recruit went down to simulate a casualty, 2 others immediately moved to provide cover while a third administered aid. They moved like a machine. Not fast, but efficient, deliberate. On the observation tower, the battalion commander leaned forward, watching intently. Who trained them? He asked. Sergeant Kane, sir. 4th instructor we assigned to this cycle. 4th? Yes, sir. The other 3 requested reassignment. The commander's eyes narrowed. And Kane didn't. No, sir. She stayed. Down on the range, the platoon reached the final objective. They established a defensive position, engaged the remaining targets, and held until the ceasefire signal sounded. Silence fell over the range. Then, slowly, the platoon stood, faces flushed, breathing hard, but standing together. Sergeant Kane walked to the center of the group. She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She just looked at them, one by one, and nodded. Good work. 2 words. That was all. But for the 43 recruits of Cycle 14B, it was everything. That evening, the battalion commander called Sergeant Kane to his office. She stood at attention in front of his desk, her uniform immaculate, her expression neutral. The commander studied her for a long moment. I read your file before you arrived, Sergeant Kane, but I'll admit I didn't read it closely. Yes, sir. He opened a folder on his desk. You were assigned to the 75th Ranger Regiment for 6 years, deployed 4 times, decorated twice for actions under fire. You served as a training cadre at Fort Benning before transferring to Special Operations Support. Kane said nothing. And then, the commander continued, you requested reassignment to basic training. Back to the bottom. Why? Kane's jaw tightened slightly. Permission to speak freely, sir. Granted. Because this is where it matters most. The commander frowned. Explain. Rangers, Special Operations, elite units. They're built on a foundation. That foundation is laid here, in basic training. If we fail recruits at this level, if we tell them they're not good enough and send them home, we lose more than soldiers. We lose potential we never gave a chance to develop. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Cycle 14B wasn't weak, sir. They were broken, and no one tried to fix them. They just labeled them failures and moved on. The commander leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. You think every struggling recruit can be saved? No, sir. But I think most of them can. If someone believes in them long enough for them to believe in themselves. The room fell quiet. Finally, the commander nodded. But you did something 3 experienced drill sergeants couldn't. You turned them into soldiers. They turned themselves into soldiers, sir. I just showed them how. The commander closed the folder. I'm recommending Cycle 14B for graduation, and I'm requesting that you continue as lead training cadre for future cycles. Kane's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Relief, vindication, purpose. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. The ceremony was held on the parade ground under a clear blue sky. Families filled the stands, cameras flashing, voices calling out names. 43 recruits stood in formation, backs straight, eyes forward, wearing their uniforms with pride. Cycle 14B, the platoon that couldn't, the rejects, the failures, they had made it. At the front of the formation, Sergeant Kane stood beside the reviewing officers. She didn't speak during the ceremony. She didn't need to. When the commander called the platoon to attention and announced their graduation, the applause was thunderous. Private Webb, now Private First Class Webb, felt something break loose in his chest. He had done it. They had all done it. Beside him, Specialist Reyes stood tall, tears streaming down her face, but her shoulders didn't shake. She had earned this. After the ceremony, families swarmed the field. Hugs, laughter, photographs. The recruits scattered, finding parents, siblings, children, Webb lingered near the formation, searching the crowd. Then he saw her, Sergeant Kane, standing alone near the edge of the field, watching the celebration with quiet satisfaction. He walked over, his new rank insignia glinting in the sunlight. "Drill Sergeant," he said. Kane turned. "Webb, I wanted to say, thank you. You didn't give up on us." Kane's expression softened, just slightly. "You didn't give up on yourselves. That's what mattered." Webb hesitated, then asked the question that had been burning in his mind for weeks. "Why did you stay? The other drill sergeants left. You could have too." Kane looked past him, toward the formation, toward the recruits laughing and embracing their families. "Because I know what it's like to be told you're not good enough," she said quietly. "I know what it's like to have someone give up on you. And I know what it feels like when one person doesn't." She met his eyes. "Someone believed in me once. I'm just returning the favor." Webb nodded, throat tight. He saluted, crisp and sharp. Kane returned it. Then he walked away, back toward his family, back toward the life he had almost lost. Kane watched him go. She watched all of them, these soldiers who had been broken and rebuilt, not by her, but with her. And for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself the smallest smile. Months later, at Fort Bragg, a young lieutenant stood in the training office, reading assignment rosters. His eyes landed on a name. "Sergeant Kane," he muttered. "Who's that?" An older officer glanced over. "You don't know." "Should I?" The officer leaned back in his chair. "She's a legend. Ranger qualified. Multiple deployments. But she gave up special operations assignments to train basic recruits." The lieutenant frowned. "Why would anyone do that?" The officer smiled. "Ask the soldiers she's trained. They'll tell you." Back at Fort Benning, Sergeant Kane stood in front of a new platoon. 50 recruits. Nervous, uncertain, already hearing whispers that they might not make it. Kane looked at them, one by one, her expression calm, controlled. "My name is Sergeant Kane," she said. "I've read your files. I know what they say about you." The recruits tensed. "I don't care what they say." And once again, she began the work of turning doubt into discipline, fear into strength, individuals into soldiers. Because that was her mission. Not glory, not recognition, just the quiet, relentless belief that every person standing in front of her was worth the effort. True strength doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand applause or recognition. It shows up quietly, day after day, and does the work no one else wants to do. Sergeant Olivia Kane didn't shatter expectations because she was loud or aggressive. She shattered them because she refused to give up on people everyone else had already written off. And in doing so, she proved something the world often forgets. Potential isn't fixed. It's revealed. By patience. By discipline. By someone who believes in you long enough for you to believe in yourself. If this story moved you, remember the quiet professionals among us. The ones who don't seek the spotlight but change lives in the shadows. They are the ones who truly matter. Until next time, stay strong, stay disciplined, and never forget the power of belief.